Anyways, yeah, we're going over chapter 33 today. And in this chapter, we essentially see how Europeans just walk over everyone and their cultures without caring. So, yeah, we learn how to just not care about anyone to get success. So, why were Europeans interested in Africa? I mean, at this point, their civilizations were really low, and any of their manufactured products just simply wouldn't account for any value. Well, Europeans found primary resources such as gold and diamonds, which brought in a lot of wealth. So, once they found out that gold and diamonds were there, they just flooded in. This walrus-looking mass is John Rhodes, and he was responsible for a lot of the expansion of the Cape Colony. This colony was ruled by the British, and the British elected John Rhodes as the Prime Minister, which gave him a lot of power when it came to deciding expansionist ideals. He especially wanted to expand because he held a monopoly on gold and diamonds, and he wanted more money, so the easiest way to do that is expand his territory. Now, John Rhodes and a lot of other Europeans believed that they were morally superior to really everyone else, and that's why they should rule the world. Last period we saw that Europeans were exploring the globe, but they couldn't really attempt to seize high order governments. So what made them so powerful during this period is industrialization, because Europeans had the wealth, resources, and supplies such as coal near them to develop industrialization, which gave them more powerful technology and weapons, which they could use to essentially conquer anyone else. Europeans soon found that trying to conquer the world is quite expensive, and supply lines cost a lot of money, along with building political instruments and people and putting people in place so they could rule over those civilizations in which they conquer. But modern imperialism was different for one reason. Like my man Putin, they found it very efficient to economically dominate certain regions in which they can exploit resources without actually having to go in with a military to demolish everyone and destroy labor. Modern colonialism was as a result of this imperialism, and colonies were simply just extensions of that empire or that state in which they ruled economically and politically. As a man is a British officer sent to really anywhere the British colonized. And the reason why Europeans sent officers or people from their original empires is in order to rule politically and economically, as they found their societies that they came up to as downright just horrible. They needed reformation and they needed new societies, so they based it off of their own European standards. Now, at first, the primary thing that attracted these businessmen and Europeans was the primary resources that they can gain from these colonies. And the state found that if they took control of these colonies, they would have direct access and cheap access to those primary products which they can manufacture into something better. And that gave a lot of rich, especially to trusts and rich people. A lot of the resources were rubber, iron, tin, copper, etc., but they also found interest in gold and diamonds and oil. Now, oil wouldn't really become important until the 1900s, but they found whale oil and petrol oil, which they would later use in many machines. A lot of the global market during this time was European states taking the primary resources which they get from their colonies and taking that over to the homeland where it was mostly industrialized and they can produce products super cheap, which they would later transport down to their colonies. So what politically drove these Europeans to go after imperialism? Well, you have to remember that Europeans were really obsessed with equilibrium of power, and they were in constant competition to stay at one with each other. They wanted to outcompete each other, and so that drove all of them to go forward with this plan, as they gained advantages such as straits and ports, which they could use to their own advantage. Nationalism was also a big factor for imperialism, as states and rulers found that they can convince their populations that they had a certain identity and they were better than the rest. And it's kind of like Trump, because he was like, "Make America great again." So, yeah, they sort of made their states great again by, unifying their states and creating an identity. A lot of the cultural justifications came from missionaries who were opposed to imperialism, but they established churches all throughout different states. And churches were comfortable places for Europeans and their white buddies to meet up and make business and communicate with local populations in which they felt comfortable with. Now, the French in particular developed a culture of civisastries. I have really no idea, but basically they thought that they needed to spread their European values because they're the best, and they just need to civilize everyone because everyone else is in the gutter. Now, taking these European ideas, Europeans thought that they were carrying the world. They were making the world a better place because they're amazing. But in reality, it looked something more like this, where poor people would be upholding the rich, fat white people. And that's kind of really the typifying point here. People like Rudyard Kipling sort of brought this to the extreme with the poetry of the white man's burden. So Europeans had a lot of snazzy tools, and like beating seals to death with clubs, they had weapons that they could beat everyone else to death with. They had better technology. They had machine guns, and they could basically kill 11 people a second. Yeah, so I mean, like, beating a helpless seal to death with a club would somewhat be similar to them just demolishing armies with guns. So basically, Europeans during this time built steamships, which were ironclad, strongly armored. They had massive guns that could basically destroy anything. They used steam instead of wind, which meant they could basically ignore all previous patterns of wind and just go wherever they wanted. Examples of steamships being awesome killing machines is the Nemesis, which just ran up the Grand Canal and basically frightened the Chinese into opening up their borders and submitting to the British, which meant that it was a pretty awesome ship. Steamships were also used for trade. In a lot of areas, they built canals for these steamships. Such can be seen with the Panama Canals and Suez Canal. This led to a massive decline in transportation costs, and they could ship goods faster than ever before, meaning that the world was even more economically connected than ever before. Oh yeah, and they also had railroads, which were pretty cool. They could ship things across the land. So military technology, specifically guns during this period, experienced a lot of development, and I'm sure Mr. Mack would possibly give us a super thorough description of all the models and blah and stuff. But you just gotta know that they developed from like a smooth bore, which was a little bit inaccurate and slow to load, to breech loading, which increased the speed of loading, to the Maxim gun, or Maxim. Anyways, yeah, so in general, guns got faster, they got more accurate, and they got more deadly, leading up to the Maxim gun, which could fire 11 rounds per second. And this caused a lot of deaths, and the Europeans used this machine gun to their advantage in many situations. Such can be seen in the Battle of Omdurman, where the British only lost 368, while the Sudanese lost 11,000. Okay, so kill people, but they still had trouble communicating with each other. So new communication tech developed, and such can be seen with like steamboats getting faster from like 2 years to 4 months into 2 weeks. These are the intervals that the book goes by. And then we finally got telegraphs. At first they were for land, and they could just beep, 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 and send it across land. Eventually, they were able to develop telegraph wires that they could go underwater. And so this increased intercontinental communication and put it up to a speed that was impossible anywhere else. So now, since this was available, they could communicate within like 5-hour periods, which is still a long time, but, a very good advancement. So that's what made European imperialism possible. All of these factors I just listed above. Next video, we're going to see how they try to outcompete each other and how certain states dealt with certain things. So yeah, I hope you had fun with this extremely boring episode of I don't even know. world history, try not to kill yourself. Yup. Like a cat here, Europeans just sat wherever they felt comfortable. And Europeans felt comfortable around churches because they believed in Christianity. So when missionaries went over to different parts of the world and they established churches there, Europeans found it comfortable to just sit there and, make business and whatnot.